الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قد أفلح المؤمنون الذين هم في صلاتهم خاشعون والذين هم عن اللغو معرضون رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. We are going to discuss the 18th juz today, encompassing Surah Al-Mu'minun, Surah Al-Nur, and a small bit of Surah Al-Furqan. The reminder is particularly going to have an emphasis in Surah Al-Mu'minun, but we are going to touch on Surah Al-Nur, because Surah Al-Nur is a very special surah as well, in particular cases when it comes to addressing slanders, right? It has slanders against Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha. It has the rulings on how men and women should interact. And it has a verse that it's actually a very strong and powerful verse describing what a real man really is, right? But Surah Al-Mu'minun also has a very powerful theme, which is describing what belief truly is, alright? It starts called the aflah, okay? Those are the first two words in this chapter. Indeed, they have succeeded. Now immediately, if you just take this at face value, we have our images of success. What is it usually? Let's not say ours, but when I say ours, we say just people in general. The image of success is like, you know, big family, lots of kids, lots of money, lots of fame, right? All of that stuff. Those are images of success. If we're going to say qad aflah, we say qad aflah, you know, the person that has all of these things, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is taking a particular thing that we understand already, but the descriptions that follow are more important. It says qad aflah al-mu'minun, the ones who truly believe. And now the descriptions follow. Who are these people who truly believe? الَّذِينَ هُمْ فِي صَلَاتِهِمْ خَاشِعُونَ. This is the first thing. الَّذِينَ هُمْ فِي صَلَاتِهِمْ خَاشِعُونَ. That when they are in prayer, they are those that are conscious of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. خَاشِعِينَ, those who are concentrated, those who are focused, those that are immersed in the prayer. We discussed the prayer of the hypocrite a few chapters ago. Actually, it was like 10 juz ago actually. The prayer of a hypocrite was one, he remembers Allah, but a little bit. Always waiting here and there, distracted, thinking of the next thing coming up. They're showing off to people, right? They're doing a yura'un al-nas, وَلَا يَذْكُرُونَ اللَّهَ إِلَّا قَلِيلًا, right? That's the prayer of a hypocrite. Now, why is this the first thing that is mentioned? Right? Salah, you know, especially if you're part of like tabligh or something like that, you understand the importance of salah. It's the first question on the day of judgment. Right? So if that question is answered, then all of the questioning is easy. But why is that the case actually? If you understand human behavior as something that is cyclical, meaning that if you do one good thing, you're more likely to do another good thing, and if you do one bad thing, you're more likely to do another bad thing, that we sort of operate in these spirals. A person doesn't become a murderer or an adulterer or a slanderer overnight. It's a habitual practice that shaitan sort of pulls them in, right? Even if you understand sort of the tafsir of Surah Al-A'raf that we covered earlier, it says فَدَلَّاهُمَا بِغُرُورٍ. Adam alayhi salam and Hawa alayhi salam, Iblis or shaitan, dallahum means that he pulled them slowly, right? Dalla yadillu is actually originally used for pulling a bucket out of a well, okay? And you know it's a slow and an effortful process. You're carefully pulling it up so the water doesn't spill. You can't just yank it, or else the bucket, you know, goes back and forth, and you're just pulling it like that. That's the description Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving of shaitan, whispering somebody towards sin, whispering somebody towards immorality, until they're at the point where there's no salvation. You give them the message of Islam, you call them to Allah, and they're like, no, goodbye, I'm going to turn away from something like this. It doesn't even resonate with me. The fitrah is completely covered, their heart is just engulfed in darkness. So that's a slow and concentrated effort of shaitan on a person to destroy them. If we trace it, really, truly trace things back to their earliest step, you sort of find it was an internal thing. It was a shift in consciousness that happened, right? This person started saying it's okay to do this small sin, or entertain these disgusting thoughts, right? It started at that internally, and then it started manifesting externally in habits, in acts, until that person became engulfed in this wickedness. This is why salah is always mentioned as, if you protect your salah, you're doing hifdh salah, which is like making sure it's done on time, and when it's done, you're done effortful, right? What you put into it is what you get out of it. If you're going to go into salah and you've done nothing for it, you were just, playing games or scrolling on social media like a few seconds before salah, and you go, good, jump up, it's time for salah, it's all, the time's almost gone. And you go into it, of course you're not going to have khushu in salah. It's something that you have to, you have to treat it like a garden, you have to water it, you have to give it effort. If you're going to go into salah, like we sort of talked a little bit about, performance salah in the first day of Taraweeh, you have to let your body settle, right? Sit down, give it a minute or two. Then get in, take some deep breaths. Get into the process of visualization. Visualizing, the Kaaba, you visualizing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's presence, the Jannah, Jahannam, the punishment of Allah behind you, the Sirat underneath you. This is a process that we took. This is taking care of your salah. That's what it's talking about. الَّذِينَ هُمْ فِي صَلَاتِهِمْ خَاشِعُونَ is people who take care of their salah so that when they perform it, it is truly, they're immersed in it. And when you're immersed in salah, when you're a person that has that khushu, you're a person that can recognize those early whispers of shaitan and nip them at the bud, rather compared to the person that is, as we covered yesterday, a person in the ghaflah. Right? اقترب للناس حسابهم وهم في غفلة معرضون. This is the 17th juz that we covered yesterday. When the hisab comes, the day of judgment comes, people are just in ghafla, they're in heedlessness. It protects you from that. So it's kind of like a root cause solution Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving. All of the filth that we're talking about in the Quran that the human being can fall into, that shaitan really wants to put you into, you want to nip it at the bud, it's the salah. Take a look at your salah, take a look at your prayer, take a look at your khushu'. If your khushu' is bad, you're kind of like an open air target. You won't even recognize maybe the whispers of shaitan. You'll think it's your own thoughts. You think of it as a good thing maybe even. وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ عَنِ اللَّغْوِ مُعْرِضُونَ. And on top of that, they're very careful with their tongues, guarding of their tongues. This is like obviously the most common sin that people fall into. The Prophet ﷺ said this in a hadith. There are no two things that take a people into the fire more than these two, which is the tongue and the private parts. If you can guard these two things, then you're better taken care of. This is the most common thing that gets you into Jahannam. وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ عَنِ اللَّغْوِ مُعْرِضُونَ وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ لِلزَّكَاةِ فَاعِلُونَ وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ لِفُرُوجِهِمْ حَافِظُونَ. It's interesting, the same two things are mentioned over here, but there's a verse in between. So we just said, وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ عَنِ اللَّغْوِ مُعْرِضُونَ. They're very careful of what their tongues say. And then instead of saying وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ لِفُرُوجِهِمْ حَافِظُونَ, the ones who are guarding their private parts, that, if you just sort of understood this hadith, you would kind of assume the Quran would go as such. It says وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ لِلزَّكَاةِ فَاعِلُونَ in between. Those who are always fa'ilun, like they're always doing zakah, essentially. Now this isn't talking about the zakah that we're used to, what was it? Aqim as-salata wa zakah. The usual common phrase we hear in the Quran, which is establishing the zakah as a practice we know of in Islam. But this is talking about tazkiyah in general as well. والذين هم للزكاة فاعلون والذين هم لفروجهم حافظون إلا على أزواجهم أو ما ملكت أيمانهم فإنهم غير ملومين. And then the verses continue. So we really need to take into consideration our personal lives when it comes to the description of a believer right now. Like seriously ask yourself, how much of the safeguarding of your prayer are you actually doing? You know it. It's not a knowledge issue at this point. There are things, decisions you're making in your life that you're not making right now. You're entertaining things that you shouldn't entertain, and avoiding sacrifices that you should make already, and that's causing your khushu and salah to wane. That's what's happening over here. And of course, then these manifest in places like your lugh, so your tongue, your speech, and then in your acts of service to others, and in the guarding of your private parts. Those are manifest attributes of you as a person not remembering Allah. And in Surah Nur, the description I was saying that defines, gives a definition of a man, like sort of redefines it from like what we always imagine to be just a person that is just always the most capable person, the strongest person of the group. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, رِجَالٌ لَا تُلْهِيهِمْ تِجَارَةٌ وَلَا بَيْعٌ عَنْ ذِكْرِ اللَّهِ وَإِقَامِ الصَّلَاةِ وَإِيتَاءِ الزَّكَاةِ يَخَافُونَ يَوْمًا تَتَقَلَّبُ فِيهِ الْقُلُوبُ وَالْأَبْصَارُ. You want to know what a real man is? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, a real man is a person, his trade, his tijara, وَلَا بَيْعٌ عَنْ ذِكْرِ اللَّهِ. His trade and his money is not going to take him away from the remembrance of Allah. A person always doing things in consideration, what does Allah want me to do over here? Not a person asking, oh, what would my parents tell me to do here? Not a person saying, oh, what will my friends do here? Not a person saying, what will my community do here? That's not what it's talking about. عن ذكر الله وأقم الصلاة وإيتاء الزكاة يخافون. And they're establishing prayer and they're giving zakah and they're fearful. يوما تتقلب فيه القلوب والأبصار. Of the day that the hearts and the eyesight are going to be like shaking from the weight of that day. So these things are intertwined. And then the last thing over here that I really want us to understand from this chapter is also Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking of guidance, light and darkness. In Surah Nur, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we know the popular verse, Nurun ala nur yahdillahu li nurihi man yasha. Right? And there's a fasir, like, I know there's a bayina tafsir of this verse that I think goes for, I think 40 hours or 50 hours just on this verse. So you can see how much tafsir is on this verse as well. I'm not going to cover much of that, but what I am going to cover is a parable Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving of lightness and darkness. It's something that consistent in the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says iman or belief or guidance, all of these things are something He compares to light. And disbelief or rejection is something He compares to darkness. The parable over here is that we judge our reality and our decision making based off of what we see. That's information coming to us, our senses mainly, right? And a person, when they have an absence of that, they're going to stumble. Imagine you had none of your senses. Imagine you were deaf. Imagine you were blind. What are you going to do in life? Seriously, what could you do in life on your own? Nothing. You can't even walk straight. And that's quite literally, if you understand how delusional the immediate reality is, and you understand how vast the unseen realm is, you understand that's exactly the case right now with guidance and misguidance. That unless you have Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as the arbiter of your decisions, the Quran as the Furqan, Surah Al-Furqan starts in this chapter as well. Al-Furqan is the Quran, the criterion between right and wrong. Unless you have that, you might as well be living blind. Nothing you're doing is right. You're stumbling across every decision you're making. You're going a direction that you don't even want to go that direction. But you have no idea where you're going until you end up over there. تَتَقَلَّبُ فِيهِ الْقُلُوبُ وَالْأَبْصَارُ. And those same, that the heart and eyes start shaking on that day. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us from that. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the guidance that we are truly in need of, and nobody should feel that they are guided by their own actions. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us from that. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us those who remember Him often. Have khushu' in our salah. Be those real men that don't have their money or their personal problems affect their dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as many people do. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik wa nashhadu an la ilaha illa ant. Nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk.